When Keanu Reeves walked onto The Melissa Carter Show, no one expected what happened next. What was meant to be a trap quickly became a battle of wits and dignity. How did Keanu turn the tables on one of the toughest hosts in America and leave everyone stunned? Watch to find out. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Keanu Reeves sat alone in his kitchen, sipping black coffee as sunlight filtered softly through the window. The usual hum of his daily routine was accompanied by the subtle clicking of his keyboard as he scrolled through emails. Most were routine: film schedules, charity event invitations, fan letters. But one subject line caught his eye immediately: exclusive invitation, a candid conversation on The Melissa Carter Show. Keanu paused, his gaze sharpening as he read the email carefully. Melissa Carter was one of America's most influential talk show hosts, famous for her sharp, often confrontational interviews. Her show was known to tackle controversial topics and challenge guests, especially those seen as traditional figures in Hollywood. Though the invitation seemed straightforward, Keanu knew better. He had seen how the show operated. The producers crafted their questions with precision, aiming to provoke and create viral moments. The audience was often selected to generate tension and support the host's agenda. This wasn't likely to be a friendly chat. Yet, there was no hesitation in Keanu's response. With calm deliberation, he took another sip of his coffee, considered the situation, then typed a simple reply: "I'd be honored." His decision was not naive. He understood the stakes and the risk of walking into a trap. But Keanu was no stranger to difficult conversations or controversy. His career spanned diverse roles and public moments, where grace under pressure defined him. This invitation was just another challenge, one he would meet with his characteristic calm and clarity. Behind the scenes, far from Keanu's quiet kitchen, The Melissa Carter Show's production team was already deep into preparations. Producers circled around a whiteboard, sketching out the perfect strategy. They reviewed clips, debated question orders, and discussed how best to frame the narrative. Melissa herself leaned against her desk, flipping through question cards with a confident smirk. "He's an easy target," she said to her producer Jake. "People love Keanu Reeves, but that's exactly why it'll work." Jake nodded, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Yeah, the world sees him as this wholesome, untouchable, nice guy, but Hollywood needs to move forward. We need to shake things up." Melissa tossed a card onto the table. "We'll paint him as outdated, a relic of an old Hollywood that needs to be left behind." The plan was clear: frame Keanu as a symbol of a fading era, challenge his traditional views, and capture the moment he faltered or showed frustration. That clip would become the viral moment of the year. The days leading up to the interview were a mix of quiet preparation and behind-the-scenes tension. Keanu continued his usual routine, unaffected outwardly by the looming challenge. His calm demeanor masked a mind that was alert and focused. He reviewed recent news, thought about possible questions, and prepared to respond with honesty and grace. Meanwhile, at the Melissa Carter Show studio, the atmosphere was electric. Crew members bustled about, adjusting cameras and lights to create the perfect visual narrative. Producers carefully selected audience members, a mix of genuine fans and individuals chosen for their readiness to react sharply. Every detail was scrutinized to ensure the setup was flawless. Melissa rehearsed her lines, practicing that warm but pointed smile that disarmed her guests just before the verbal barrage. She knew this would be her defining moment. Capturing Keanu off guard would not only boost ratings, but reinforce her reputation as one of the toughest interviewers in the industry. On the day of the interview, Keanu arrived quietly, stepping off his black motorcycle with the same understated presence that had endeared him to millions. Some crew whispered excitedly as he passed, others exchanged skeptical glances. Even the security guard couldn't hide his admiration. "Big fan, Mr. Reeves," he said with a grin. Keanu nodded in appreciation but remained focused. Inside, the set was meticulously arranged. Cameras were positioned for maximum effect. Lighting softened to highlight Keanu's classic Hollywood features. Producers monitored the live feed with intense concentration, ready to cut or amplify moments as needed. The audience was a carefully curated mix, seated to create the desired energy. Some there to support Keanu, others planted to provoke. The stage was set for the confrontation that everyone anticipated. As the red light blinked on the camera, signaling live broadcast, Keanu and Melissa took their seats across from each other. Melissa flashed her flawless smile, greeting him warmly. "Keanu Reeves, welcome to the show," she said smoothly. Keanu returned the greeting with a calm nod. "Thank you. It's a pleasure." The audience responded with polite applause, the atmosphere light but charged with expectation. The trap had been set, but what no one realized yet was that Keanu was already several steps ahead. The cameras rolled and the show went live. The atmosphere in the studio became electric. The audience was carefully arranged, a blend of genuine fans and strategically placed skeptics ready to react at a moment's notice. The production crew monitored every angle, adjusting lights and camera focus to capture the perfect shots, the shots that would fuel the narrative Melissa Carter and her team were determined to create. Melissa Carter leaned forward, her voice silky but charged with intent. "Let's begin with a simple question," she said, eyes locked onto Keanu with calculated warmth. "What do you think about the future of Hollywood?" Keanu offered his signature calm smile, his demeanor composed and steady. "I've been fortunate in my career," he replied evenly. "Hollywood is always evolving. The stories change to reflect the times, but the core of human experience, our hopes, fears, struggles, and triumphs, remains constant." His words, though measured, carried an undeniable depth. To the casual listener, it was a polite, thoughtful answer. But to anyone watching closely, it was clear Keanu was alert and mindful, already anticipating the challenges ahead. Melissa's smile tightened ever so slightly. Her tone shifted, subtle yet deliberate. "You've often portrayed a certain type of masculinity, the strong, silent hero. In today's rapidly changing culture, do actors like you still have a place?" The audience quieted, the question hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. It was the first true challenge. Keanu took a brief pause, his gaze steady as he responded. "Stories will always change, but values, those fundamental principles, do not. Courage, loyalty, standing up for what's right, these endure beyond any era." There was a ripple of reaction from the crowd. Some nodded thoughtfully, others exchanged glances, sensing the growing tension. Yet Keanu's calmness seemed to anchor the room, diffusing what might have become a hostile environment. Behind the scenes, Melissa's producers exchanged uneasy looks. Their plan was to unsettle Keanu, provoke a reaction that could be clipped and spread across social media, but instead, their target was composed, refusing to take the bait. The game had just begun, but Keanu Reeves was already rewriting the script. His measured poise and clear-eyed answers were beginning to turn the interview into something unexpected. A masterclass in dignity and quiet strength. Melissa's confidence flickered for the first time. She masked it with a practiced smile, but the shift in energy was palpable. The audience, too, was leaning in, drawn by the unfolding dynamic. What was meant to be a trap was swiftly becoming a stage for Keanu to demonstrate the power of grace under pressure. And everyone watching sensed that this encounter was about to become far more than just another celebrity interview. Behind the bright lights and polished set of the Melissa Carter show, a very different scene unfolded. In a room just off stage, producers and writers gathered around a whiteboard covered in notes, photos, and carefully planned questions. The mood was electric, charged with the anticipation of what was to come. Melissa Carter stood by the desk, flipping through a stack of cue cards, her expression a mix of confidence and determination. She was fully aware of the impact this interview could have, not just on her show's ratings, but on her own career. This was her moment to make headlines. "Keanu Reeves," Melissa said, tapping a card with her finger, "people see him as the wholesome, untouchable Hollywood nice guy. That's exactly why we have to challenge that image." Her producer, Jake, nodded slowly, a sly smile crossing his face. "The public loves him because he's the good guy, but we need to show a different side. He's from an old era, stuck in outdated ideas. Our job is to bring that into the spotlight." The plan was clear: portray Keanu as irrelevant, outdated, a symbol of a Hollywood masculinity that no longer fit with today's progressive narratives. They would push him on his iconic action roles, suggesting those characters glorified violence and toxic masculinity. Questions were carefully crafted, phrased to seem casual but loaded with subtext designed to provoke. They planned to highlight cultural shifts, pushing Keanu to appear out of touch with the new Hollywood. Melissa ran through the list, marking spots where she could pivot from seemingly innocent questions to more aggressive challenges. Each moment was designed to build tension, capture a reaction, and produce a viral soundbite. Behind her, the producers worked on selecting the audience. It wasn't left to chance. Some attendees were loyal fans, expected to provide polite applause and positive energy. Others were chosen for their willingness to react critically, ready to challenge Keanu's answers and push the narrative. From the audience, the production team debated over seating arrangements, ensuring those poised to create controversy sat where cameras would capture their reactions best. The balance had to feel natural, but every detail was deliberate. As rehearsals progressed, Melissa practiced her lines, perfecting the tone that combined warmth and subtle confrontation. She knew this delicate dance well, drawing guests in with charm before striking with pointed questions. Her team reviewed past interviews, noting how other guests had faltered or reacted defensively. They prepared for every possible response, scripting follow-up lines to maintain control. But beneath the confident exterior, some producers expressed unease. Keanu was known for his grace and composure under pressure. Could they really provoke him into making a mistake? Melissa dismissed the concerns with a confident smile. "He's famous for being nice, but everyone has limits. We'll find us." As the interview day approached, the Melissa Carter Show's production team intensified their preparations. The lighting technicians worked to create a warm yet focused atmosphere that would emphasize every expression on both Melissa's and Keanu's faces. Camera operators rehearsed their angles, ensuring they could capture any subtle shifts in emotion or hesitation. Every detail mattered. The audience selection was finalized with care. A mix of genuine Keanu fans and vocal skeptics filled the seats. The fans would offer moments of support, creating a contrast to the critics, who would challenge him and amplify any perceived misstep. This blend was designed to maximize drama and keep viewers glued to their screens. Melissa reviewed her cue cards one last time, memorizing her shifts from polite curiosity to pointed confrontation. She practiced her smile, that delicate balance between warmth and challenge, meant to disarm her guests before pulling the rug out from under them. Backstage, a producer handed Melissa notes on Keanu's recent interviews, highlighting how he had handled questions about masculinity and violence before. The goal was to catch him off guard this time, with sharper, less expected inquiry. Melissa's confidence grew with every rehearsal. "This is going to be the viral moment everyone's talking about," she said, glancing around at her team. "Keanu Reeves is beloved. But that's exactly why this will work. People love watching their heroes fall from grace." Despite the confidence in the room, some crew members quietly worried. Keanu's reputation for calm and grace was well earned. If anyone could avoid the traps set for him, it was Keanu Reeves. But the team pressed on, preparing contingency plans for various possible outcomes. If Keanu responded with anger or defensiveness, it would fuel sensational clips. If he dodged questions, Melissa could press harder, framing him as evasive. Either way, the show's ratings would soar. Meanwhile, Keanu maintained his calm. He spent the morning reviewing recent news, reflecting on the changing cultural landscape. He understood the challenges ahead, but chose to approach them with openness, knowing that staying true to himself was the strongest response. As he prepared to leave for the studio, he reminded himself that this was not about winning or losing a debate. It was about speaking honestly and respectfully, regardless of the pressure. On the day of the interview, the studio buzzed with activity. Crew members moved swiftly, finalizing last-minute setups while Melissa prepared in her dressing room, reviewing her notes and mentally rehearsing. Her poised smile was steady, but beneath it lay a fierce determination to control the narrative. Keanu arrived at the studio with quiet confidence. He wore his signature understated style, simple, comfortable clothing that reflected who he was, not who others expected him to be. The security team greeted him respectfully, and he exchanged nods and brief smiles with crew members. Backstage, the producers held a final briefing. "Remember," the lead producer said, "every question is designed to unsettle him. Watch for any signs of frustration or defensiveness. That's what we need." The audience, already seated, buzzed with anticipation. Some whispered about Keanu's reputation for grace, others about Melissa's sharp interviewing style. Cameras captured every angle, ready to broadcast live. As the red light blinked, signaling on air, Melissa and Keanu took their places. The stage was perfectly set. The polished set, the bright lights, the carefully arranged audience. The tension was palpable. Melissa opened with practiced warmth. "Keanu Reeves, thank you for joining us today." Keanu smiled gently. "Thank you for having me." The first questions were soft, easing the audience in. But behind the scenes, the producers were alert, waiting to trigger the carefully planned shift in tone. Melissa's next words carried a sharper edge. "You've portrayed some of Hollywood's most iconic action heroes, the strong, silent type. But today, many question whether that kind of masculinity is outdated. What do you think?" The room quieted, the trap set. Keanu's response would shape everything that followed. But what no one expected was how effortlessly Keanu held his ground. Calm, thoughtful, he began turning the conversation around, challenging assumptions and forcing the host and audience to reconsider their own views. Behind the scenes, the producers exchanged uneasy glances. The interview was no longer unfolding as planned. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the city as Keanu Reeves arrived at the Melissa Carter Show studio. He moved with the quiet confidence that had become his trademark, his footsteps steady and unhurried. Wearing simple, comfortable clothing, dark jeans, a plain jacket, and a soft t-shirt, he blended understated elegance with ease, avoiding the flashiness often associated with celebrity arrivals. As he walked through the studio's entrance, a few crew members and bystanders couldn't help but notice him. Some smiled warmly, others exchanged whispered comments. A security guard approached, his face lighting up with genuine admiration. "Mr. Reeves, great to see you again," he said, extending a hand. Keanu gave a small, polite nod in return, acknowledging the respect without fuss. Behind the scenes, the production team was already in high gear. Lighting technicians adjusted their equipment, aiming to create an atmosphere that was at once inviting and dramatic. The goal was clear. Every shadow and highlight needed to emphasize the tension that would unfold during the interview. Camera operators moved strategically, positioning themselves to capture every nuanced glance, every subtle shift in expression. The set was polished to perfection, gleaming floors, modern furniture arranged to frame the host and guest, and a backdrop that combined sleek graphics with warm tones. Producers lingered nearby, reviewing their plans one last time. The atmosphere was charged, a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Everyone knew that today's show could be a career-defining moment for both Melissa and Keanu. Keanu remained composed, taking a moment to breathe deeply and center himself before stepping onto the stage. His calm demeanor belied the intense preparation going on behind the scenes. Though he was fully aware of the trap awaiting him, he had chosen to meet it with grace and honesty. As the audience began filing into their seats, the energy in the room grew palpable. The crowd was carefully curated, a blend of loyal fans eager to support Keanu and critics ready to challenge him. The mix was designed to create an unpredictable and charged environment. Keanu's assistant quietly handed him a bottle of water, a small gesture of care amid the bustling activity. He accepted it with a quiet thank you, eyes scanning the room with steady focus. There was no sign of nervousness or hesitation, only a serene readiness. Meanwhile, Melissa Carter prepared in her dressing room, her expression a mask of confidence. She reviewed her notes, rehearsing her questions and planning her shifts in tone. The production team buzzed around her, ensuring that every detail from microphone placement to wardrobe was flawless. The moment was approaching. The bright stage lights awaited, the cameras stood ready, and the audience settled into their seats. All that remained was the start of the conversation that would soon captivate millions. As the studio doors opened, the audience began to filter in, their chatter filling the air with a mix of excitement and curiosity. Some were longtime fans of Keanu Reeves, drawn by his reputation as Hollywood's humble and kind-hearted star. Others were skeptical, there to see how he would handle the tough questions Melissa Carter was known for. The production team had carefully arranged the seating to balance support and challenge. Loyal fans were sprinkled among critics and observers. Their reactions meant to create a dynamic energy that would be palpable on camera. Each seat was chosen with precision to ensure that the show's narrative could unfold exactly as planned. Backstage, Keanu took a moment of quiet reflection. Despite the buzz and anticipation, he remained grounded. His calm confidence came from years of experience both on-screen and off, in navigating public scrutiny with dignity. He knew that staying true to himself was the best way to meet whatever came next. The makeup artists applied subtle touches, ensuring that his appearance was natural yet camera-ready. His hair was carefully arranged, his face clean-shaven, highlighting the lines of a man who had lived through both triumph and hardship. The simplicity of his look contrasted with the complex emotions he carried inside. Security personnel moved discreetly but attentively, ensuring that Keanu's path through the bustling studio was smooth and uninterrupted. Fans who recognized him glanced up, some eager for a chance to offer a quiet word of encouragement or simply a respectful nod. Keanu acknowledged these gestures with gentle smiles, maintaining his composed demeanor. On the set, the lighting crew adjusted the spotlights, casting a soft glow that framed the host and guest in perfect balance. The backdrop glimmered with subtle colors designed to evoke a sense of seriousness and professionalism, setting the tone for a conversation that promised to be both compelling and challenging. Melissa Carter, meanwhile, prepared to take her place on stage. She reviewed the last of her notes, her mind sharp and focused. She was determined to steer the interview in a direction that would expose Keanu's views and test his responses. Every question was designed to push boundaries and elicit reactions that could captivate the audience. As the show's musical intro began, signaling the start of the live broadcast, the energy in the studio reached a crescendo. The camera crew signaled to the director, and the countdown to live went up on the monitors. Keanu stepped forward gracefully, crossing to his chair opposite Melissa. His movements were measured, calm, a picture of poise. The applause from the audience was genuine, but controlled, a reflection of the carefully managed atmosphere. Melissa extended her hand with a polished smile. "Keanu Reeves, thank you for joining us today," she said warmly. Keanu responded with his characteristic soft smile and a nod. "Thank you for having me." The camera zoomed in, capturing the moment as the red light blinked on. The show was live. The stage was set, the players in position, What unfolded next would soon become a defining moment in both their careers. With the cameras rolling and the audience fixated on every word, the studio was thick with anticipation. Every aspect, the carefully crafted questions, the selected audience, Melissa Carter's practiced poise, was intended to unsettle Keanu Reeves. Yet, there he sat, calm, collected, radiating a quiet strength that seemed to fill the space. Keanu's presence brought a grounded energy to the set. His gaze was steady, unflinching, his expression subtle but deeply meaningful. He spoke softly but with conviction, his words resonating far beyond their quiet tone. Each sentence carried a weight that commanded respect, demonstrating that strength does not require volume. Melissa began the interview with her usual polished warmth, recounting Keanu's remarkable career and his beloved status in Hollywood. The audience responded with polite applause, creating the illusion of a friendly conversation. But beneath that veneer, the true contest was underway. Melissa's tone shifted subtly as she introduced her first pointed question, designed to challenge Keanu's image and position him as a relic of a changing Hollywood. Keanu listened intently, his face betraying no surprise or discomfort. Rather than react defensively, he responded thoughtfully, reframing the question with clarity and insight. His measured answer peeled back layers, revealing a nuanced understanding that contrasted sharply with the simplistic narrative the producers intended. The audience leaned forward, caught off guard by the depth of his reply. Whispered exchanges and curious glances spread through the crowd as they sensed the unfolding shift in power dynamics. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged nervous looks. Their carefully laid trap was unraveling. Keanu's unshakable calm and eloquence were deflating their strategy, turning their own weaponized questions into opportunities for him to demonstrate grace and wisdom. Melissa forced a smile, concealing a flicker of frustration beneath her composed exterior. She adjusted her posture, preparing to escalate her questioning in an effort to regain control. But Keanu's steady composure and insightful responses kept the room balanced on a knife's edge, teetering between confrontation and respect. The energy was charged but contained, a testament to his ability to navigate tension without losing his dignity. As the interview progressed, it became clear to everyone present that this would not be a typical celebrity appearance. Instead, it was evolving into a masterclass in poise, intellect, and quiet resilience. The initial moments set the tone for what would become a profound exchange, one that challenged assumptions, questioned narratives, and revealed the true measure of character. Melissa may have entered the studio expecting to corner Keanu, but in those early moments, it was evident who was truly in command. The studio lights bathed the set in a warm glow as the cameras rolled, the red live sign flashing brightly. Melissa Carter opened the interview with a polished warmth, her smile broad and genuine, or at least perfectly practiced. "Keanu Reeves, welcome to the show. It's truly an honor to have you here today," she said with smooth confidence. Keanu responded with his trademark calm smile and a soft nod. "Thank you for having me," he said evenly, his voice steady and unhurried. The audience responded with polite applause, their energy controlled but appreciative. The moment set the tone. A friendly, respectful conversation was underway, at least on the surface. Melissa launched with seemingly easy questions, designed to create comfort before the deeper challenges. "Your career has been remarkable. Action hero, romantic lead, dramatic roles. How do you look back on your journey?" Keanu considered the question for a moment. "I've been fortunate to play many different characters. Each one has offered a chance to tell a story that connects with people. I'm grateful for the variety and the experiences." Melissa nodded encouragingly, then broadened the topic. "Hollywood is always changing. What do you think the future holds? What stories will resonate with audiences going forward?" Keanu's smile deepened slightly. People always want stories that reflect their experiences: courage, love, loss, triumph. The way those stories are told evolves with time, but the core human emotions remain the same. While their words sounded conversational, Keanu's keen senses picked up on the subtle shifts in Melissa's tone and demeanor. There was a calculated edge beneath her warm exterior, a sign that this friendly exchange was about to take a sharper turn. Melissa's eyes held a glint of anticipation as she prepared to pivot. The producers watched from the control room, their eyes fixed on every movement, waiting for the moment to spring the trap. Keanu's calm and humble manner seemed to settle the audience, creating an atmosphere of ease. People leaned in, captivated by his thoughtful answers and gentle presence. The tension was masked by this polite facade, but behind the scenes, the real contest was about to begin. This opening was more than just polite banter. It was a strategic pause, a prelude to the challenging questions that would soon follow. Keanu's readiness was clear. Beneath his humility lay a sharp mind, prepared to navigate the complexities ahead with grace. Melissa's practiced smile remained, but her body language hinted at the coming shift. She was poised, ready to test the limits of Keanu's patience and resolve. The audience awaited the moment when the tone would change, unaware of the powerful exchange about to unfold. Melissa Carter shifted slightly in her chair, maintaining her warm smile but subtly sharpening her tone. Keanu, many people see you as the embodiment of traditional Hollywood masculinity, the strong, silent type. But lately there's been a lot of debate about what masculinity means today. Some argue that the kinds of characters you've portrayed, heroes who fight, protect, and sometimes resort to violence, are outdated. What's your take on that? The studio seemed to hold its breath. The question, carefully crafted, was meant to unsettle Keanu and force him into a defensive corner. The audience leaned forward, sensing the rising tension. Keanu met Melissa's gaze steadily, his calm undisturbed. Stories evolve, but values remain. Courage, loyalty, standing up for what's right. Those things don't go out of style. How we tell those stories may change, but why we tell them stays constant. There was a subtle shift in the room. Some audience members nodded thoughtfully. Others exchanged uncertain glances. The polite facade was giving way to a deeper conversation, one that challenged assumptions and invited reflection. Melissa pressed on, trying to regain control. But your films often center on violence and revenge. Some say that glorifies aggression and ignores vulnerability. Do you think that has an impact on audiences? Keanu considered her words carefully before responding. Conflict is part of life. Stories about struggle and redemption reflect the complexities of human experience. The violence you mention is rarely glorified. It's part of a journey toward justice or protection. But true strength, I believe, lies in knowing when not to use it. The audience was visibly engaged, drawn in by his thoughtful approach. The balance of power was shifting, and the producers began exchanging worried looks. Melissa's smile tightened. She knew this wasn't going as planned. Her scripted narrative was unraveling, replaced by a dialogue that was both respectful and challenging. Keanu's humility and clarity were disarming. His words invited understanding rather than conflict, forcing the audience and Melissa to reconsider the preconceived notions they had brought into the room. The polite facade was still there, but beneath it, a battle of ideas was unfolding, with Keanu quietly taking the lead. Melissa pressed harder. Some say Hollywood should move away from violence altogether. Do you think films should avoid showing conflict? Keanu's expression remained calm. If we remove stories about struggle, redemption, even violence, what are we left with? Life isn't always peaceful. Films reflect the reality of human experience. They help us process pain and loss, and they inspire us to protect what matters. That's not toxicity, that's humanity. A murmur ran through the audience, some nodding in agreement, others lost in thought. The energy in the room shifted again, the once eager crowd now more contemplative. Behind the scenes, Melissa's producers were growing anxious. Their strategy was faltering. Keanu's answers were not only thoughtful but resonating with many watching. Melissa forced a light laugh, masking her frustration. But Keanu, some argue that these kinds of roles send the wrong message, especially to younger viewers. Keanu leaned forward slightly, voice gentle but firm. I was raised by a single mother who worked harder than anyone I knew. She taught me, strength isn't about power. It's about responsibility, standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. My characters may fight, but their actions come from protecting what they love, not from aggression alone. The audience absorbed his words in silence. Keanu's sincerity cut through the noise, grounding the conversation in lived experience. Melissa opened her mouth to respond, but Keanu wasn't finished. True strength is knowing when not to fight. It's about compassion as much as courage. The room was still, the polite facade now completely stripped away, revealing a profound dialogue that challenged both host and audience. Melissa's composure showed signs of strain. Her practiced smile was tighter now, the warmth fading as she realized her carefully constructed narrative was slipping away. She shuffled her cue cards, searching for the next point to regain control, but the momentum had clearly shifted. Keanu, she said, voice a little sharper but still controlled, you've had an incredible career spanning decades, yet many in the industry are talking about change. New voices, fresh faces, different stories. Don't you think it might be time for stars like you to step aside to make room? The audience tensed, understanding the implication. It wasn't just about Hollywood's future, it was a direct suggestion that Keanu's era was over. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering her words with genuine thought. When I was growing up, he began softly, I was taught that respect for those who came before us is essential. It's interesting how today, respect seems optional. A hush fell over the room. The simplicity and gravity of his statement struck a chord with many. Even some skeptics found themselves silent, reflecting on the deeper meaning. Melissa blinked, her usual quick-witted response faltering. She tried to laugh, but the sound was thin, lacking conviction. The crowd's energy was no longer in her favor. Keanu's calm presence dominated the space. He didn't raise his voice or attack back. Instead, he let his words and quiet dignity speak for themselves. The audience began to pull out phones, recording this unguarded moment. The cameras captured every second. The tension, the shifting power, the undeniable charisma of a man who refused to be boxed in or belittled. Melissa's eyes darted briefly to the producers behind the scenes. They were whispering urgently, signaling her to change tactics, to regain control. But it was too late. The conversation had become a masterclass in humility and strength, and Keanu was leading it effortlessly. The polite facade of the opening was gone. In its place was a raw, honest exchange that left everyone in the room, and soon the millions watching at home, with something to think about. Melissa cleared her throat and forced a smile, attempting to pivot the conversation, but the impact of Keanu's words lingered. A reminder that true power doesn't need to shout, it simply needs to be real. The atmosphere in the studio grew thick as Melissa Carter directed a pointed question toward Keanu Reeves, challenging the very foundation of his celebrated roles. Her voice carried a sharp edge as she spoke about concerns surrounding the portrayal of masculinity in Hollywood. She suggested that the characters Keanu embodied, stoic, strong, sometimes violent, might promote a harmful, outdated ideal. The audience leaned in, waiting for a reaction that could spark controversy. Keanu sat still, his expression unreadable but calm. He took a brief pause, a moment to gather his thoughts. Then, in a voice measured and steady, he responded with a quiet authority that cut through the tension. I understand the concern, he began softly, But I believe stories about courage, sacrifice, and protecting those we love are not toxic." His tone was gentle, yet it carried a deep conviction. The audience, which had been bracing for defensiveness or anger, found themselves drawn in by his calm presence. The characters I've portrayed represent more than just physical strength. They embody responsibility, loyalty, and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Melissa's confident smile faltered for just a moment. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing their scripted narrative was slipping away. Keanu's thoughtful reply was shifting the room's energy, turning skepticism into contemplation. He continued, his eyes meeting the audience's, then Melissa's, as if inviting them to understand a different perspective. Violence in stories is rarely glorified for its own sake. It's often part of a larger journey, one that involves justice, redemption, or protection. If we remove conflict from storytelling, we deny the complexities of the human experience. The room fell into a hush, the only sound the soft murmur of the studio's equipment. Some audience members nodded quietly, others exchanged looks of surprise. The tension that had built with Melissa's probing questions was softening under Keanu's composed explanation. Melissa cleared her throat, attempting to steer the conversation back to familiar ground, but the impact of Keanu's words lingered. The polite facade was cracking, revealing a deeper dialogue about values and truth. Keanu added, "I was raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly. She taught me that strength isn't about dominance. It's about responsibility. It's about standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves." His voice carried the weight of personal experience, grounding the conversation in reality rather than rhetoric. The audience absorbed this, the empathy in Keanu's tone resonating deeply. Melissa opened her mouth to respond but hesitated. The room's energy had shifted irrevocably. The producers behind the monitors looked on, concerned yet captivated. Keanu's calm rebuttal was not only thoughtful but disarming. It challenged the narrative Melissa sought to construct, and in doing so, unsettled the entire production. The polite exchange was over. Now a quiet battle of ideas was underway, and Keanu Reeves was quietly leading it. Melissa's smile tightened as she tried to regain control. She flipped through her cue cards, preparing to escalate the pressure. "Keanu, your movies often revolve around revenge, violence, and aggression. Many argue that Hollywood should move away from glorifying these themes. Do you think these portrayals send the wrong message, especially to younger audiences?" Keanu met her gaze calmly, his demeanor unshaken. He took a moment before answering, his tone soft but deliberate. "Stories are more than just what happens on the surface," he said. "What matters is why the characters do what they do." He leaned forward slightly, engaging the audience with his steady voice. "I was raised by a single mother who worked harder than anyone I knew. She taught me that true strength isn't about power or dominance. It's about responsibility, compassion, and standing up for those who cannot protect themselves." The audience grew silent, hanging on his every word. Keanu continued, "The characters I've played, like Neo or John Wick, face struggles rooted in loss and grief. Their actions come from a place of protecting what they love, not simply violence for violence's sake." Melissa's attempt to interrupt was subtle but evident. "But don't you think there's a risk that repeated portrayals of violence normalize it?" Keanu shook his head gently. "If we remove stories about conflict, redemption, and justice, what are we left with? Life isn't always peaceful. Films reflect human reality. They allow us to process pain, loss, and hope. That's not toxic. That's human." The audience nodded in agreement, some whispering to neighbors. The balance of power was shifting noticeably. Producers in the control room exchanged worried looks. Their narrative was unraveling. Melissa's expression grew guarded as she tried to reassert control. "So you believe Hollywood should continue with these themes despite the criticism?" Keanu's voice remained calm but firm. I believe Hollywood should move toward truth. People don't watch films like John Wick because they want to see violence. They watch because they understand loss, grief, and the desire to protect what matters. The room was completely silent for a moment. Even Melissa seemed taken aback by the clarity and sincerity of his words. Keanu concluded, "That is not toxicity, that is humanity." The audience reacted with subtle applause, a recognition of the depth behind his simple statement. Melissa's grip on the conversation was slipping fast. Melissa's poised facade began to falter as Keanu's words echoed through the studio. The careful script she had prepared to corner him was unraveling, replaced by a conversation that revealed her own vulnerabilities. The audience sensed the shift, leaning forward in their seats, captivated by the quiet strength of Keanu's message. Trying to regain control, Melissa forced a light laugh, masking her frustration. "Keanu, some say it's time for Hollywood to embrace new voices, new stories, and different faces. Don't you think it might be time for actors, like you, to step aside for the next generation?" Her question was pointed, carrying the unspoken implication that Keanu's era was over. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Keanu tilted his head slightly, considering her words with genuine thoughtfulness. "When I was a kid," he began softly, "I was taught that respect for those who came before us is essential. It's interesting how, today, respect seems optional." The audience absorbed his words in reverent silence. The simplicity of the statement struck a chord, and even some of Melissa's staunchest supporters found themselves nodding in agreement. The power in the room had clearly shifted. Melissa blinked, her usual quick-witted response momentarily lost. She tried to laugh, but the sound was thin and forced. The momentum was no longer hers. Keanu didn't raise his voice or lash out. Instead, he let his presence and words speak volumes. His quiet dignity filled the space between them. Cameras captured every nuance, the flicker of frustration in Melissa's eyes, the unwavering calm in Keanu's. Phones emerged from pockets as audience members recorded the unexpected exchange. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged worried glances. Their plan to ambush Keanu had backfired spectacularly. Melissa cleared her throat and attempted to steer the conversation back to familiar territory, but Keanu's thoughtful insights had set a tone that was impossible to ignore. The polite facade was gone, replaced by a meaningful dialogue that challenged assumptions and invited reflection. As the segment ended and cameras prepared to cut to a break, the room remained charged with the energy of a conversation that none present would soon forget. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the interview moved deeper into its most charged moments. Melissa Carter fixed her gaze on Keanu Reeves, her smile now more controlled, her tone deliberately poised. She pressed the issue again, her voice calm but sharp. "Keanu, many people believe that the stories your films tell, of courage, protection, even violence, are part of an outdated ideology. They say it promotes toxic masculinity, and that Hollywood should evolve beyond it. What do you say to that?" Keanu looked at Melissa steadily, his calm demeanor unshaken. He took a breath before replying, his voice measured and thoughtful. "I hear those concerns, but I don't see stories about courage and protection as toxic. To me, they're fundamental human experiences. They speak to the essence of what it means to care deeply for others, to stand up when it matters most." His words landed softly but firmly in the charged atmosphere. The audience, initially tense, began to lean in, drawn by the quiet strength in his reply. Keanu continued, "Many of my characters face difficult choices, battles not just with external enemies, but within themselves. These are stories about sacrifice, loyalty, and the responsibility we have to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's not something to dismiss, it's something to understand." Melissa's expression flickered with surprise, her carefully constructed argument wavering. Behind the scenes, the producers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing their narrative was losing momentum. Keanu's measured response began to shift the room's energy. Some audience members nodded slowly, while others appeared to reconsider their initial skepticism. He added, "Violence in stories isn't glorified for its own sake. It's part of a larger journey toward justice or healing. Removing conflict entirely would ignore the realities of life. Stories help us make sense of pain, grief, and hope. That's not toxicity, that's humanity." The studio was silent except for the hum of equipment. Melissa blinked, momentarily speechless. The conversation was no longer a simple attack. It had become a thoughtful dialogue about values and truth. Keanu's calm rebuttal unsettled Melissa. Her smile tightened as she searched for a way to respond, but the room was already swaying toward him. The audience, too, was shifting. Keanu's words resonated deeply, touching something real beyond the noise of controversy. Melissa maintained her composed smile, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. She glanced briefly at her notes, searching for a way to pivot the conversation back to familiar territory. "Keanu, your films like John Wick and The Matrix are renowned for their intense action scenes and themes of revenge. However, there is growing concern that such portrayals might glorify violence and send a harmful message, especially to younger viewers. Don't you think Hollywood should shift away from focusing on aggression and instead promote more peaceful narratives?" Keanu met her gaze steadily, exuding calm confidence. His voice was soft, yet each word carried deliberate weight. "Stories are complex," he began thoughtfully. "They're not just about the actions on screen, but about the motivations and consequences behind those actions." He leaned forward slightly, making eye contact with the audience. "I was raised by a single mother who worked harder than anyone I knew. She taught me that strength is not about dominance or power. It's about responsibility, compassion, and standing up for those who cannot stand up for themselves." The audience fell into a respectful silence, captivated by the genuine sincerity in his tone. Keanu continued, "The characters I've portrayed, whether it's Neo, John Wick, or others, carry the weight of loss, grief, and a profound desire to protect those they care about. Violence in these stories is rarely glorified for its own sake. Instead, it's often a painful but necessary part of a larger journey toward justice, redemption, or healing." Melissa attempted to interject gently, "But isn't there a danger that repeated exposure to such violence in media can normalize aggressive behavior in society?" Keanu shook his head slowly, his expression unwavering. "If we remove stories about conflict, struggle, and redemption, what are we left with? Life is rarely peaceful or simple. Films reflect our realities. They help us process pain, understand loss, and hold on to hope. That's not toxicity. That's the essence of being human." A wave of nodding and quiet murmurs rippled through the audience. The mood shifted palpably. The producers monitoring the broadcast exchanged uneasy glances, realizing their scripted agenda was losing its grip. Melissa's smile began to falter as she tried to maintain her composure. "So, you believe that these themes of conflict and protection still have a valid place in storytelling, despite the criticism?" Keanu's response was calm but firm. "I believe Hollywood should pursue truth in storytelling. People don't watch films like John Wick simply for the violence. They watch because they understand themes of loss, grief, and the deep desire to protect what matters most." The studio descended into a respectful hush. Even Melissa seemed momentarily caught off guard by the clarity and conviction in his words. Keanu concluded, "That is not toxicity. That is humanity." Soft, appreciative applause broke out among the audience. Melissa's control of the conversation was visibly weakening as the power dynamic clearly shifted. Melissa's poised demeanor showed signs of cracking, The carefully scripted attack she had prepared was unraveling as Keanu's calm, thoughtful words resonated with the audience. She shifted in her chair, forcing a smile that no longer reached her eyes. The energy in the room had changed. What was meant to be a trap was turning into a lesson. Desperately trying to regain control, Melissa attempted to steer the conversation back to a familiar narrative. Keanu, with all due respect, many believe Hollywood needs new voices and fresh stories to reflect today's culture. Don't you think it might be time for actors like you to make way for the next generation? Her words carried an unspoken challenge that Keanu's time was past. The audience grew silent, the weight of the question hanging heavy in the air. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his expression contemplative. When I was a child, I was taught that respect for those who came before us is essential, he said softly. It's interesting, though, how today, respect often seems optional. The simplicity and truth of his statement caused a ripple through the audience. Some nodded quietly, others looked toward Melissa, who struggled to maintain her composure. Melissa blinked, caught off guard. She attempted to laugh, but the sound was thin and forced. The momentum was no longer hers to command. Keanu remained composed, his presence filling the space without aggression or anger. His quiet dignity spoke volumes. Cameras captured every moment, the flicker of frustration on Melissa's face, the unwavering calm in Keanu's eyes. Audience members pulled out phones, recording the unexpected exchange. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged concerned looks. Their attempt to corner Keanu had spectacularly backfired. Melissa cleared her throat, searching for a way to regain the narrative. But the power had shifted, and Keanu's thoughtful words had set a tone impossible to ignore. The polite facade had dissolved, replaced by a meaningful dialogue that challenged assumptions and invited reflection. As the segment ended and cameras prepared for a commercial break, the room remained charged with the energy of a conversation no one would soon forget. Melissa Carter leaned forward, her voice sharpening with intent. Keanu, your films, John Wick, The Matrix, are filled with intense violence and scenes of revenge. Many critics argue that these portrayals glorify aggression and don't give enough space to vulnerability. In a world that's increasingly calling for empathy and peace, don't you think these kinds of stories are problematic? The studio fell into a tense silence. Melissa's words were carefully crafted to unsettle Keanu and challenge his legacy. The audience sensed the rising stakes, their attention fixed on how he would respond. Keanu looked at her with steady, calm eyes. He took a deliberate breath before replying in a voice both measured and thoughtful. I understand that perspective, Melissa. But I believe there's a lot more beneath the surface of those stories. He paused briefly, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. The characters I've portrayed carry deep themes: loss, grief, and an unwavering desire to protect the ones they love. Their actions come from a place of profound emotional struggle, not simply a glorification of violence. Melissa's confident smile flickered, her plan encountering unexpected resistance. Keanu's reply was disarming, not defensive, but an invitation to look beyond the surface. He continued, vulnerability is a key part of these narratives. Even the strongest characters carry their own pain and struggles. The physical action you see on screen is often an external expression of internal battles. The audience began to shift, some nodding in agreement while others whispered quietly. Keanu's words bridged the gap between thrilling spectacle and emotional depth, encouraging a more nuanced understanding. Melissa pressed again, determined to regain control, but Keanu remained composed. If we focus only on the violence, we risk missing the human story behind it. These films offer a way to explore difficult emotions, loss, betrayal, hope, and the courage to keep going despite it all. Behind the scenes, the producers' confident expressions waned. Their carefully laid trap was unraveling before their eyes. Keanu's thoughtful and poised response was steering the conversation away from confrontation toward reflection. The interview, initially designed as an ambush, was transforming into a profound dialogue that would resonate with viewers far beyond the studio walls. Melissa's next question came, tinged with frustration. But don't you think Hollywood should move toward stories that prioritize peace and healing rather than conflict and violence? Keanu met her gaze steadily. Peace and healing are important, absolutely. But conflict is a part of life. Ignoring it in stories doesn't make it disappear. Instead, stories that include conflict and resolution help us understand ourselves and each other better. He added softly, they allow us to process pain and find meaning in suffering. That's why these narratives remain relevant. The room was quiet, the audience deeply engaged. Even Melissa's efforts to steer the conversation were met with an unshakable calmness from Keanu. His words were shifting perceptions, encouraging the audience to see beyond stereotypes and headlines. The balance of power in the room had clearly shifted, with Keanu quietly leading a conversation about the true meaning behind the stories Hollywood tells. Melissa's smile, though still on her face, had grown thinner, almost strained. She rifled through her notes again, searching for a way to regain control of the conversation. But Keanu's calm presence and thoughtful responses were steadily turning the tide. She pressed on, hoping to keep the pressure on Keanu. Critics often say that Hollywood's focus on violence and revenge can desensitize viewers or even encourage aggressive behavior. Don't you think it's time for the industry to shift toward more positive, peaceful stories, ones that emphasize healing and understanding? Keanu's gaze remained steady, his voice calm and measured as he replied, I understand that concern deeply. Stories do have an impact on how we see the world, and it's important that they do so responsibly. But I believe the stories I've been part of aren't about glorifying violence for its own sake. They are about exploring the complexities of human emotion, loss, grief, and the drive to protect what we care about. He paused, then looked around at the audience and Melissa. When you look beneath the surface, these stories show vulnerability as much as strength. They show that even the most powerful people carry wounds and face internal battles. The action you see is often a metaphor for those deeper struggles. The audience shifted, the atmosphere softening. Some nodded knowingly, others whispered in agreement. Keanu's words had bridged the gap between surface-level criticism and deeper emotional truth. Melissa tried to regain her footing. But couldn't the repeated portrayal of violence risk normalizing it in society, especially among impressionable viewers? Keanu shook his head gently. That's a valid concern. But removing conflict from stories doesn't erase conflict from life. Instead, stories provide a way for us to understand and process those struggles safely. They help us face pain, loss, and injustice, and sometimes offer hope through redemption and courage. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of equipment. The power dynamics in the studio were changing, the producers behind the scenes looking uneasy as their narrative lost momentum. Melissa attempted to redirect the discussion, but the impact of Keanu's thoughtful rebuttal lingered. The interview had shifted from a confrontational setup to a meaningful conversation about human nature and storytelling. Keanu's poised words had sparked reflection, not defensiveness, encouraging the audience to reconsider their preconceptions and engage with the complexity of the issues. Melissa took a breath, sensing the room's shift and her diminishing control. She tried one last tactic, her voice steady but edged with urgency. Keanu, Hollywood is changing rapidly. There's pressure for new voices, new stories, sometimes even a call for older actors to make way. Do you think it's time for your generation to step back? The audience held its breath, waiting for his response. The question was more than about film. It was a pointed challenge to Keanu's place in the industry. Keanu's expression remained calm, his voice thoughtful as he replied, Respect for those who came before us was a core lesson in my upbringing. It's surprising how often respect feels optional nowadays. His words echoed through the studio, carrying a quiet power that resonated deeply. The crowd responded with nods and quiet murmurs. Melissa's confident smile faltered, replaced by tension. Keanu continued, "I don't believe in stepping aside just because time passes. I believe in evolving, growing, and honoring those who paved the way. That's how progress happens, with respect and continuity." Melissa's attempt to interrupt was weak. The audience's attention was firmly with Keanu. He added softly, "True strength comes from kindness, humility, and standing up for what matters. It's not about loudness or aggression. It's about integrity." The cameras captured every moment, the contrast between Melissa's faltering facade and Keanu's composed dignity. Phones began recording, the audience compelled to capture this unexpected lesson in grace under pressure. Behind the scenes, producers whispered anxiously. Their plan to ambush Keanu had spectacularly backfired. The interview moved beyond the trap and into a meaningful exchange that challenged viewers to rethink stereotypes about strength, masculinity, and respect. As the segment wrapped, the studio was filled with a palpable sense of reflection, a testament to Keanu's quiet but powerful rebuttal. The atmosphere in the studio began to change subtly but unmistakably. The audience, which had initially been primed to support Melissa Carter's tough line of questioning, started to shift in their demeanor. They exchanged glances, whispered quietly, and began to reconsider the narrative they had been presented. Keanu Reeves sat calmly, his posture relaxed yet commanding respect. With each question Melissa posed, he answered with grace and logic, gently dismantling her attempts to paint him as outdated or irrelevant. His measured tone and thoughtful insights cut through the tension, drawing viewers into a deeper, more reflective conversation. Behind the scenes, the producers monitoring the live feed grew visibly uneasy. The control room, once buzzing with confidence as the plan unfolded, now hummed with concern. The narrative they had meticulously constructed was unraveling before their eyes, replaced by Keanu's quiet strength and eloquence. As the cameras panned to the audience, many faces showed surprise and even admiration for Keanu's calm responses. Some audience members, who had arrived ready to challenge him, found themselves nodding or biting their lips in thoughtful silence. The shift in sentiment was subtle but powerful, changing the energy in the room. Melissa, sensing the tide turning against her, tried to regain control. She smiled tightly, her questions growing sharper but losing their edge. She attempted to redirect the conversation back to criticism, but the warmth and respect Keanu commanded from the audience made her efforts increasingly difficult. Keanu's demeanor never wavered. He maintained eye contact, responding not with defensiveness, but with compassion and clarity. Each answer invited listeners to see beyond the surface, to consider the complexity behind his roles and the humanity within the stories told. The audience's reaction reflected this. Where once there was skepticism, now there was reflection. Where there had been tension, a quiet respect was emerging. Some even pulled out their phones, recording snippets of the exchange, knowing they were witnessing something rare, a conversation where grace met challenge and dignity held sway. The producers, meanwhile, scrambled to adjust. They whispered urgently, exchanging plans to cut away or insert commercial breaks, hoping to regain control of the narrative before it slipped further. But it was too late. The audience had already begun to question the agenda behind Melissa's questions and to admire Keanu's refusal to be rattled. As the segment continued, the studio felt charged with an unexpected energy. It was no longer just a talk show. It had become a space where assumptions were questioned, where respect and kindness were quietly championed. The energy in the studio shifted palpably as more audience members started whispering to each other, their expressions turning from curiosity to skepticism. The carefully curated crowd, initially filled with some hostile and eager to challenge faces, was now showing signs of doubt about Melissa Carter's intentions. Keanu's calm, thoughtful responses weren't just deflecting the tough questions, they were inviting deeper reflection. The audience began to see beyond the surface of the setup, recognizing the grace and integrity in his words. The tension Melissa had worked to create was dissolving into genuine engagement. The producers behind the scenes grew more anxious. Their fingers flew over control panels, whispering instructions into headsets. The plan to create a viral clip casting Keanu as out of touch was backfiring spectacularly. Instead, they were witnessing the rise of a different narrative, one that centered on kindness, strength, and respect. Melissa tried to steer the conversation back to confrontation, but the audience no longer responded as before. The polite claps were more measured, the murmurs of support for Keanu louder. Some audience members exchanged glances, as if silently questioning whether Melissa's agenda was fair or justified. A few cameras captured close-ups of faces showing mixed emotions, some disappointment in the host, others admiration for Keanu's unshaken composure. Phones began appearing as people discreetly recorded moments of the interview, ready to share online. Keanu's ability to dismantle the hostile narrative with calm logic unsettled Melissa more than she let on. Her smile remained, but it no longer reached her eyes. She flipped through her cards rapidly, searching for a question that could regain momentum. But Keanu continued undeterred to address the concerns with empathy and insight. His measured tone made it clear that this was not a battle to be won with anger or defensiveness, but with thoughtful dialogue and understanding. Audience members shifted in their seats, some nodding along as they absorbed the deeper meaning behind his words. The studio was no longer a place of ambush, but of genuine exchange. The producers' whispering grew frantic. They knew the narrative had slipped away, and they scrambled to consider damage control options before the interview ended. Despite the tension, Keanu remained composed, the embodiment of quiet strength. His responses encouraged the audience and the viewers at home to question snap judgments and to embrace empathy over division. The shift was undeniable. Melissa Carter's carefully crafted trap was dissolving, replaced by a powerful lesson in dignity and grace. As the interview progressed, the atmosphere in the studio became increasingly charged, but in an unexpected way. The audience, initially primed to support Melissa's hard-hitting approach, was now visibly questioning her agenda. Murmurs grew louder, and a subtle undercurrent of doubt rippled through the crowd. Keanu Reeves continued to dismantle these sharp criticisms with unwavering calm and precision. Each answer was a masterclass in grace and logic, disarming not only Melissa, but also the carefully selected audience. His thoughtful reflections encouraged the viewers to look beyond the surface conflicts and consider the deeper human truths behind his film roles. Melissa's expression tightened. She struggled to maintain her confident demeanor as her control over the narrative slipped away. The polished questions that once seemed like traps now felt ineffective against Keanu's poised presence. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged anxious glances and whispered urgently, trying to devise a plan to regain control of the broadcast. They considered cutting away or editing the segment post-show, but it was too late. The audience's perception had shifted irreversibly. Phones appeared everywhere in the audience as people discreetly recorded Keanu's composed responses. These clips would soon flood social media, amplifying the shift in public sentiment away from Melissa's intended narrative. Despite the pressure, Keanu remained composed and gracious. His demeanor was neither defensive nor aggressive. Instead, it radiated a quiet confidence and integrity that resonated deeply with those watching. The audience responded with measured applause and subtle nods, recognizing the power of his words and the authenticity of his character. The interview had transformed from a confrontational ambush into a meaningful dialogue about respect, strength, and empathy. Melissa tried one last time to pivot the conversation, but the moment had passed. Keanu's calm rebuttal had set the tone for the rest of the show, and for the viral clips that would soon dominate social media. As the cameras prepared to cut to commercial, the studio buzzed with a mix of tension and admiration. What had started as a planned ambush had turned into a powerful statement from one of Hollywood's most respected figures. Melissa Carter's expression tightened as she sensed the momentum shifting away from her. Her sharp questions and carefully crafted criticisms had not delivered the expected viral moments. The audience's growing admiration for Keanu Reeves's calm and thoughtful demeanor unsettled her. Determined to regain control, she switched tactics. Leaning forward with a slightly forced smile, Melissa spoke directly to Keanu. "Keanu, Hollywood is evolving rapidly. There's a strong push for new voices, fresh faces, and stories that reflect today's world. Do you think it might be time for actors like yourself, who represent a different era, to step aside and make way for the next generation?" Her question carried a subtle but pointed implication, that Keanu Reeves, with all his past successes, might now be outdated or irrelevant in this changing landscape. The audience grew quiet, awaiting his response, sensing this was a pivotal moment in the interview. Keanu met her gaze steadily, his expression composed and calm. "Respect for those who came before us was a fundamental lesson in my upbringing," he began softly, his voice steady. "It's interesting how, today, respect sometimes feels optional." The simplicity of his words landed deeply. They weren't just about Hollywood. They touched on universal values and the changing dynamics of society. He continued, "I don't believe in stepping aside simply because time passes. Growth comes from honoring those who pave the way while welcoming new voices. Progress isn't about replacement, it's about continuity and respect." The audience absorbed his words, some nodding in agreement. Keanu's response had flipped Melissa's narrative, turning the challenge into a moment of reflection. Melissa's smile faltered as she searched for a reply, but Keanu's calm presence and thoughtful insights left little room for argument. The question hung in the air. Was respect truly optional, or was it the foundation for genuine progress? Behind the scenes, producers exchanged worried glances. Their plan to portray Keanu as a relic of the past was unraveling. The audience, once primed to see him as outdated, now saw a figure who embodied timeless values. Keanu added quietly, "True strength isn't about dominance or loudness. It's about kindness, humility, and standing up for what matters. That doesn't fade with time." The cameras captured the contrast, Melissa's forced composure against Keanu's natural grace. Phones appeared as audience members recorded the exchange, knowing they were witnessing an unexpected turning point. Melissa's next move would be critical, but the momentum was clearly with Keanu. Melissa shifted in her seat, her expression tightening as she struggled to regain control. The room's energy was no longer on her side. Keanu's calm and measured words had turned the conversation into a reflection on values rather than a confrontation. Trying to reassert her authority, Melissa pressed on. "Keanu, some argue that the industry must evolve, that new perspectives are essential for progress. Older stars stepping aside creates opportunities for fresh talent. How do you respond to those who say your style of masculinity is becoming irrelevant?" Her tone was pointed, seeking to unsettle Keanu or provoke a defensive response. The audience was silent, awaiting his reply, aware that this question was loaded with implications. Keanu's gaze remained steady. He leaned forward slightly, his voice thoughtful and composed. "I grew up with a deep respect for those who came before me. That respect is a cornerstone of any meaningful progress. It's surprising how often respect seems optional nowadays." His words resonated beyond Hollywood, touching on cultural shifts and generational divides. The audience shifted in their seats, absorbing the wisdom in his response. Keanu continued, "Progress doesn't mean forgetting the past or dismissing the contributions of those who paved the way. It means building on their foundation while embracing new ideas. Melissa blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the depth of his reply. Her rehearsed talking points felt inadequate against Keanu's sincerity. He added softly, "Strength is not about loudness or aggression. It's about kindness, humility, and standing up for what truly matters. Those qualities never go out of style." The audience responded with quiet nods and murmurs of agreement. Phones discreetly recorded the exchange, ready to capture this defining moment. Behind the scenes, producers whispered urgently, aware their plan was slipping away. They scrambled to consider how to pivot, but the audience's reaction was clear. Keanu's message was resonating powerfully. Melissa's smile became more strained. She tried to maintain her composure, but was losing ground. The narrative had shifted from an ambush to a lesson in dignity and respect. Keanu's quiet strength was captivating the viewers, proving that true influence comes not from confrontation, but from grace. Melissa Carter's smile waned as she realized her strategy was faltering. The confident, polished host was now facing an unanticipated challenge. Keanu Reeves wasn't playing by the script. Instead, he was calmly reclaiming the conversation, turning her own words back on her. Determined to regain control, Melissa asked one last pointed question, her tone measured but sharp. "Keanu, do you think your generation's style of masculinity and storytelling can still connect with today's audiences? Or is it time to make way for newer narratives that better reflect current values?" The audience tensed, the question hanging in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Keanu met the challenge without a hint of hesitation. His voice remained calm, filled with quiet conviction. "I believe respect is the foundation of all meaningful progress. It's something I was taught early on, and it's something I continue to live by." He paused, letting the words resonate. Progress isn't about erasing what came before us. It's about honoring it while building something better. That's how growth works, by respecting the past and welcoming the future. The audience nodded, clearly moved by his sincerity and insight. Keanu's eyes locked with Melissa's, his next words carrying a subtle but powerful weight. True strength isn't about loudness, aggression, or dominance. It's about kindness, humility, and standing up for what's right, qualities that never go out of style. The cameras captured the stark contrast, Melissa's forced composure against Keanu's effortless grace. Phones popped out from pockets and purses as audience members quietly began recording the moment, knowing they were witnessing something authentic and impactful. Behind the scenes, producers whispered anxiously, realizing their narrative was slipping beyond their control. They scrambled to consider damage control strategies, but knew the tide had turned. Melissa's final attempts to redirect the conversation fell flat. The audience was captivated by Keanu's message, and social media would soon amplify it worldwide. As the segment wrapped up, the studio buzzed with an unexpected energy. What began as a planned ambush had become a testament to dignity, respect, and the power of grace under pressure. The atmosphere in the studio was thick with anticipation. The conversation had taken unexpected turns, and every eye was on Keanu Reeves as he prepared to respond to Melissa Carter's latest challenge. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the calm, steady look in his eyes, the kind of quiet confidence that had long endeared him to fans around the world. Melissa's question hung in the air. "Keanu, do you believe respect is still a value that matters in today's society, or has it become optional?" The room seemed to hold its breath. The audience leaned in, sensing something important was about to be said. Keanu took a slow breath and met Melissa's gaze steadily. His voice was calm, measured, but carried an undeniable weight. "I think respect seems optional these days." The words landed softly, but with the power of a thunderclap. Silence swept over the room like a wave, momentarily washing away the background noise and the flicker of studio lights. The cameras stayed fixed on Keanu's face, capturing every nuance of the moment. the quiet intensity, the subtle sadness, and the undeniable truth in his statement. No one spoke. The audience was frozen, the gravity of the statement resonating deeply. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the viral moment they had hoped to manufacture had instead been overtaken by something far more genuine and impactful. Social media watchers began picking up on the tension in the studio feed, and clips started circulating in real time. Keanu's simple but profound line was spreading like wildfire, becoming an instant rallying cry for those longing for civility and respect in a divided world. Melissa blinked, momentarily speechless, her well-rehearsed script unraveling as she processed the weight of his words. The studio audience slowly broke into quiet applause, respectful, sincere, and reflective rather than performative. The power of that moment was undeniable. A single sentence, quietly spoken, had shifted the energy in the room and sparked a movement beyond the studio walls. As the silence lingered, the studio audience remained captivated. The simple phrase, "Respect seems optional these days," echoed in the minds of everyone present. It was more than a statement, it was a reflection of a cultural moment, a challenge and a call for change, wrapped into just a few words. Phones began appearing as audience members discreetly recorded the moment, knowing they had witnessed something rare and profound. Clips of Keanu's statement quickly began making their way onto social media platforms. Within minutes, the phrase was being shared, quoted, and discussed across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The phrase resonated with millions worldwide, people drawn to Keanu's calm dignity and the timeless truth he had voiced. It became a hashtag, "Respect seems optional," symbolizing frustrations about the growing divisions and lack of civility in public discourse. Back in the studio, Melissa Carter struggled to regain her composure. Her carefully planned narrative had unraveled, replaced by a moment of authenticity that she hadn't anticipated and couldn't control. Keanu remained composed, aware of the growing impact of his words but showing no sign of arrogance or triumph. Instead, he carried a quiet responsibility, as if the statement was not just for the moment, but for something much larger. The audience's applause grew, this time warmer and more sustained. It was a recognition of the power of humility and truth over provocation and spectacle. The producers behind the scenes scrambled to manage the fallout. They debated cutting away or shifting focus, but the energy had shifted irreversibly. The narrative was no longer about ambushing Keanu, it was about listening to him. Melissa's smile was strained as she nodded to Keanu, acknowledging the unexpected turn of events. The rest of the show would be shaped by this moment, and everyone knew it. For the viewers watching at home, the phrase quickly became a mantra, shared widely as a reminder of the values many felt were being lost. Keanu's calm but powerful voice had broken through the noise, sparking a conversation that would continue far beyond the studio. The clip of Keanu's statement, "Respect seems optional these days," continued to ripple through social media like wildfire. Within hours, it was trending across multiple platforms: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. People from all walks of life shared the moment, praising Keanu not only for his composure in the heated interview, but for the profound truth behind those few words. Influencers created videos highlighting the calm strength Keanu displayed, pairing his phrase with scenes of kindness and humility. News outlets picked up the story, analyzing how a simple line had sparked a viral movement. Commentators debated the cultural climate that made those words resonate so deeply, recognizing a widespread longing for more civility in society. The hashtag "Respect seems optional" was born overnight, becoming a rallying cry for those frustrated by growing incivility and division. Across the globe, people used it to share stories, reflections, and calls to return to basic human dignity. It became less about Keanu Reeves the actor and more about the universal need for kindness and respect. Back in the studio, the energy was palpable. The audience, still buzzing from the exchange, whispered excitedly amongst themselves. Many pulled out their phones to capture the rest of the interview, eager to preserve every thoughtful response and share it widely. The atmosphere had transformed from confrontational to contemplative, a space for meaningful dialogue rather than antagonism. Melissa Carter, once so confident in her ability to control the narrative, now faced the reality of having been outmaneuvered. Her polished facade cracked as she struggled to regain footing. Behind the scenes, producers whispered anxiously, running damage control strategies. But they understood the narrative was now firmly in Keanu's hands. Keanu remained composed throughout, aware that his words had struck a chord far beyond the studio walls. His humility shone through, conveying that this moment was not about personal victory, but about a larger conversation that needed to happen. As the segment wound down, the cameras caught a quiet but powerful smile from Keanu, a smile that reflected experience, grace, and a hope for a more respectful world. It was a reminder that true strength is gentle, measured, and rooted in empathy. The viral moment redefined the interview and transcended it, sparking conversations across communities about how we treat one another in everyday life. For millions watching, Keanu's words became a beacon, a reminder that respect is not optional, but essential to human connection. Viewers echoed the sentiment, sharing stories of kindness lost and regained, and expressing gratitude for a public figure who chose to meet conflict with dignity. The phrase itself took on a life of its own, inspiring art, memes, and thoughtful discussion worldwide. In the days and weeks that followed, "Respect seems optional these days" continued to resonate, a powerful cultural touchstone. Keanu Reeves hadn't just won an interview, he had quietly shifted a conversation about respect, empathy, and humanity, reminding everyone of the power of grace under pressure. The interview had reached a crucial turning point. Melissa Carter, visibly trying to regain control of the conversation, leaned in with a measured but biting tone. "Keanu, you've shared some very thoughtful answers tonight, but let me ask you this. Do you really believe all of that? Or is this just another Hollywood script, a rehearsed performance designed to protect your image and avoid difficult questions?" The room instantly shifted. The question was sharp, calculated, designed to provoke a reaction. The audience hushed, waiting for Keanu's response. Melissa's eyes glinted with anticipation, convinced she had cornered him at last. But Keanu didn't flinch. His expression remained calm, his demeanor unruffled. A soft chuckle escaped him, a sign that he saw the question for what it was. A trap. He tapped his fingers lightly against his knee, taking a deliberate pause before responding. "A Hollywood script?" he repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting way to look at it." The audience leaned forward, captivated by his measured tone. He looked at Melissa, then at the cameras, and his voice took on a gentle yet firm quality. "No, I don't think truth needs a script." His words were simple but powerful, cutting through the tension like a knife through fog. The studio fell into a heavy silence, the weight of his statement sinking in. Melissa blinked, momentarily disarmed. She had expected defensiveness, anger, or at least hesitation, but instead, Keanu responded with a grace and clarity that silenced the room. He continued, his voice steady, "But I do think people sometimes mistake conversation for confrontation." The audience was riveted, hanging on his every word. Keanu tilted his head slightly, as if considering the moment carefully. "I came here thinking we were having a conversation, but it feels like you came here looking for something else." The subtle accusation hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in calm wisdom. Gasps rippled through the audience, some whispering among themselves, sensing the power of his insight. Melissa's confident facade faltered, and her smile tightened. She attempted to regain composure, but the moment had clearly slipped away from her. Keanu's quiet humor and wisdom had exposed the trap, turning the interview into a lesson on dialogue and respect. Melissa's face tightened, the tension in the room thickening. She had intended to rattle Keanu with her question, but instead she found herself facing a calm, poised man who refused to play the role she had written for him. Kisham. Keanu's eyes held a quiet certainty as he continued. It's easy to confuse an honest conversation with confrontation in today's world. But there's a difference. Conversation means listening, understanding, and sharing ideas, not trying to trap someone or prove them wrong. The audience absorbed his words, a few nodding appreciatively. Keanu's tone wasn't defensive, it was reflective, inviting a broader reflection on how dialogue is conducted today. Melissa shifted in her seat, glancing at her cards, searching for a way back into the narrative, but the audience's attention was firmly on Keanu. His grace under pressure was transforming the atmosphere from a tense ambush to an enlightening exchange. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but deliberate. I believe in truth, not in scripts. I believe in stories that reveal our shared humanity. Stories about courage, love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. The editor trembled. He paused briefly, eyes meeting Melissa's. These aren't cliches, they're fundamental truths. The crowd reacted quietly, many moved by the sincerity behind his words. Phones discreetly recorded the moment, ready to share this unexpected wisdom. Melissa's smile was forced now, her attempts to regain control weakening. Keanu's calm dismantling of her trap had not only diffused the tension, but had also shifted the power dynamic. Behind the scenes, producers exchanged worried looks. Their plan for a viral moment casting Keanu as outdated had been upended by the actor's quiet strength and eloquence. The cameras continued to capture every expression, every pause, every nuanced word. The interview was no longer just entertainment. It had become a meaningful dialogue about respect, truth, and humanity. Keanu's response reminded everyone watching that real strength lies not in confrontation, but in grace. Melissa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure as she prepared her next move, but the moment had shifted irrevocably. Keanu Reeves had not only dodged her trap, he had flipped the entire narrative on its head with quiet humor and profound wisdom. Keanu smiled softly, the kind of smile that conveyed understanding and a hint of gentle amusement. You asked if this is just another Hollywood script, he said, voice steady and calm. I suppose that depends on what you think a script really is. He paused, letting the question linger in the room. To me, a script is a story, one that can teach, inspire, and reflect the complexities of life. And sometimes, those stories challenge us. They challenge how we think, how we feel, and how we treat each other. The audience listened intently, captivated by his thoughtful response. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet strength that resonated deeply. Keanu's gaze met Melissa's with steady honesty. If truth needs a script, then maybe it's a script worth following. But I think the problem isn't with stories or scripts. It's with how we choose to hear them. The studio was silent except for the hum of cameras capturing the moment. This wasn't the viral moment Melissa had planned, but it was one far more meaningful. Keanu continued, People often mistake tough conversations for attacks, and when that happens, no one wins. What I wanted tonight was a conversation, a real one, but I felt the questions were designed to trap, not to understand. His words were a gentle rebuke, a call for more empathy and dialogue. Melissa's smile faded further as she realized the power of his statement. The trap she set had been dismantled not with anger or defensiveness, but with grace and wisdom. The audience responded with warm applause, a collective acknowledgement of Keanu's dignity and insight. As the segment drew to a close, Keanu remained humble, his message clear. Strength is not loud or aggressive. It's measured, kind, and rooted in truth. The cameras pulled back, capturing the entire scene, a rare moment of calm triumph in the midst of a planned storm. The tone in the studio had shifted dramatically. What began as a tense ambush was now turning into a platform for meaningful conversation, all thanks to Keanu Reeves' steady control over the narrative. Melissa Carter's carefully planned questions, intended to unsettle and provoke, were instead becoming opportunities for Keanu to share his thoughts on empathy, kindness, and the deeper truths behind storytelling. Step. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice calm and reflective. Storytelling isn't just about drama or conflict on the surface. It's about the human experience, the moments of compassion, the sacrifices made, the struggles that shape us. The audience listened, rapt, their initial skepticism fading away. Keanu's words resonated with many, reminding them why they admired him in the first place, his ability to bring depth and humanity to his roles. Melissa's smile tightened as she struggled to keep the conversation on her intended track. Behind the scenes, the producers were growing increasingly uneasy. Their carefully constructed narrative was unraveling before their eyes, and the live audience's reactions made it clear that the momentum was firmly with Keanu. Keanu continued. In a world that often feels divided and harsh, kindness and empathy become revolutionary acts. These are the stories that need telling, stories that remind us of our shared humanity. The audience responded with quiet nods and murmurs of agreement. Phones emerged as viewers captured the exchange, knowing this moment was special. Melissa tried to interrupt, but Keanu gently raised his hand, signaling he was not finished. It's easy to get caught up in conflict and drama, but the true power lies in the moments where we choose understanding over judgment, compassion over anger. His voice was soft but firm, echoing through the studio in a way that silenced the room. Behind the cameras, producers frantically whispered, searching for a way to regain control. But Keanu was in his element. He wasn't reacting defensively. He was leading the conversation with grace and wisdom. Melissa's attempts to pivot the discussion seemed increasingly strained. The audience wasn't just watching, they were connecting, moved by Keanu's perspective. The atmosphere in the studio was noticeably different now. The once tense and confrontational mood had softened, replaced by an attentive, almost reverent silence. Keanu Reeves's calm, thoughtful demeanor was drawing in the audience, shifting their perspective with every word he spoke. The planned ambush had lost its edge, replaced by a genuine conversation about empathy, kindness, and the deeper truths in storytelling. Keanu continued, his voice steady and sincere. We live in a world where misunderstanding and division seem to dominate the headlines. But storytelling at its best reminds us of our shared humanity. It reveals the struggles, the hopes, and the resilience that connect us all. He glanced across the room, meeting the eyes of several audience members who nodded in quiet agreement. Some whispered to one another, their expressions softening, reflecting the impact of his message. Melissa tried to interject, her tone sharper now, attempting to steer the conversation back to her original agenda, but Keanu anticipated the move, continuing without missing a beat. Kindness is often mistaken for weakness, and empathy can be confused with naivety, yet these qualities are what give us the strength to endure and to build bridges where others see walls. The camera caught a few close-ups of the audience, faces moved by his words. Some raised their phones to record, recognizing they were witnessing something rare, an honest, compassionate dialogue in a space usually reserved for conflict and spectacle. Behind the scenes, the producers exchanged anxious glances. Their plan to provoke and create viral controversy was unraveling. Instead, Keanu was becoming a figure of calm wisdom, effortlessly commanding attention and respect. Keanu's voice softened even more, as if sharing a personal truth. Hollywood is more than just entertainment. It's a reflection of our values, our fears, and our aspirations. The stories we tell have the power to shape how we see each other and ourselves. A ripple of soft applause spread through the audience, sincere and heartfelt. Keanu had transformed the interview from a battle into a moment of connection and understanding. Melissa's smile tightened, her attempts to regain control faltering. She watched as the audience's focus remained unwavering on Keanu, her carefully crafted narrative now overshadowed by his grace. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every subtle gesture, every thoughtful pause. The segment was no longer just a TV interview. It was a live testament to the power of kindness and truth in a world that often feels fragmented. The mood in the studio grew even more reflective as Keanu's words continued to resonate. His calm presence had transformed what started as a hostile setting into a space for thoughtful dialogue. Viewers, both in the audience and watching from home, felt the genuine sincerity behind every sentence. Keanu's voice softened as he said, "It's easy to get caught up in drama and conflict, but true storytelling shows the depth of human experience, the courage to be kind, the strength to forgive, and the power of hope." He paused, letting the message sink in. The audience remained silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Melissa Carter, now visibly rattled, attempted to shift gears. "Keanu, many of your fans adore your humility and kindness, but don't you think sometimes Hollywood glorifies violence and revenge? Doesn't that send a complicated message?" Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "I understand the concern, but stories like John Wick aren't about glorifying violence. They explore themes of loss, grief, and protection. People watch because they connect with the emotion behind the action, and I think especially action movies, where you see a character dying for love, hate, anger, fear." He met Melissa's eyes and added, "Those stories aren't just about fighting. They're about fighting for something worth protecting." That's a universal truth. The studio audience reacted quietly but powerfully. Some murmured in agreement, others nodded, and phones discreetly recorded the exchange for social media. Behind the scenes, producers whispered anxiously, recognizing once again that their plan was slipping further out of control. The viral moment they sought to manufacture had turned into an authentic lesson in humility and understanding. His voice grew softer, yet more resolute. "Kindness and strength are not opposites. They complement each other. Real strength knows when to fight, but also when to show mercy." As the segment came to a close, the cameras captured Keanu's humble smile and composed demeanor. He had not only defended his craft, but had done so in a way that elevated the conversation beyond celebrity or controversy. The viral moment was not a clash or an attack. It was a masterclass in grace and wisdom, reminding everyone of the power of empathy in today's world. The moment Keanu Reeves' calm and powerful responses aired, the digital world erupted. Clips from the interview spread rapidly across social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Within minutes, viewers were sharing, commenting, and reacting, turning the interview into a viral sensation. Hashtags like #RespectUncensorable and Keanu did flinch began trending globally, encapsulating the public's admiration for Keanu's grace and unwavering composure. The words resonated deeply, especially in a time when online discourse was often divisive and confrontational. Thousands of comments poured in, praising Keanu's ability to maintain dignity in the face of a deliberate ambush. Many viewers called his responses a masterclass in humility and a beacon of calm in a chaotic world. The public's overwhelming positive reaction revealed a hunger for genuine kindness and thoughtful dialogue. Influencers and celebrities joined the conversation, sharing clips and applauding Keanu's approach. Some spoke about how his measured words reminded them of the importance of empathy and respect, both on and off camera. The interview's clips were dissected and discussed in forums, podcasts, and news outlets. Analysts praised Keanu's refusal to be baited into aggression, noting how his calm dismantling of the trap redefined the narrative. Instead of controversy, the interview sparked a broader conversation about civility and understanding. The systematic, unwavering civility in a waiting. Viewers posted personal stories about times they faced harsh criticism or misunderstanding and found inspiration in Keanu's example. Many shared the hashtags alongside messages encouraging respect and kindness in everyday life. Memes and artwork celebrating the moment flooded platforms, highlighting Keanu's serene smile and the iconic line, "Respect seems optional these days." The phrase quickly became a cultural touchstone. For days, the conversation continued to grow. People across the globe, from all ages and backgrounds, echoed the call for respect and compassion. Keanu's quiet strength had struck a chord far beyond Hollywood. The public's response was not just admiration for a celebrity, it was a collective yearning for a more respectful and empathetic world. As the viral clips multiplied, social media platforms became flooded with diverse reactions. The vast majority were overwhelmingly positive, praising Keanu Reeves's calm demeanor and thoughtful responses. The hashtags "Respect Intentional" and "Keanu Did Flinch" were trending worldwide, trending in cities as diverse as New York, London, Sydney, and Mumbai. Twitter users shared their admiration for Keanu, highlighting how his ability to stay composed under pressure was a lesson in dignity and grace. Comments poured in from people who felt inspired to approach difficult conversations with more kindness. Many remarked on how rare it was to see such a genuine display of humility in a culture often driven by conflict and sensationalism. Influencers across various platforms helped amplify the message. They created compilations of Keanu's most impactful quotes, paired with soothing music and visuals, emphasizing empathy and respect. These videos rapidly accumulated millions of views, fueling the momentum of the viral moment. Podcasters and commentators dissected the interview frame by frame, applauding Keanu's refusal to be baited by provocative questions. They praised how he transformed an ambush into a dialogue about shared values and humanity. News outlets covered the story extensively. Headlines emphasized Keanu's masterful composure and unexpected victory of kindness over confrontation. Editorials reflected on the cultural significance of his words, noting how his statement about respect had resonated in a world craving gentleness. At the same time, social media became a platform for deeper conversations. People shared personal anecdotes of times they had faced judgment or hostility and expressed how Keanu's example encouraged them to respond with empathy. The viral explosion wasn't just about the interview, it sparked a movement. People used the hashtags to promote campaigns for civility online, kindness in public discourse, and the importance of listening. Memes and artistic tributes celebrating Keanu's calm smile and the iconic phrase, "Respect seems optional these days," circulated widely. The imagery symbolized a yearning for a more compassionate world. Even skeptics and critics acknowledged the impact. Many commented that regardless of personal opinions, Keanu's approach was a refreshing contrast to the usual media drama. For days, the conversation sustained, uniting people from different backgrounds around a shared call for respect and understanding. Keanu's response transcended celebrity. It became a cultural touchstone, a gentle reminder of the power of kindness. The viral momentum carried over into traditional media as well. Talk shows, radio programs, and news outlets debated the significance of Keanu Reeves' interview. Many experts praised his calm and measured approach, describing it as a much-needed antidote to today's often combative public discourse. His statement, "Respect seems optional these days," was quoted widely, becoming a rallying cry for advocates of civility. Across social platforms, users shared their appreciation for Keanu's ability to turn a potential confrontation into a meaningful conversation. The hashtags "Respect Intentional" and "Keanu Did Flinch" continued to trend, accompanied by thousands of heartfelt testimonials about kindness and empathy inspired by his words. Celebrities and public figures weighed in, lauding Keanu for embodying the very values he spoke about. Many highlighted his humility and the quiet strength he showed, contrasting it with the aggressive tone often found in media interviews. This added further fuel to the ongoing viral wave. Fans created tributes, art, and videos that captured Keanu's gentle smile and poised responses. The phrase, "respect seems optional these days," appeared on posters, memes, and shared images, symbolizing a collective call for change in how people interact, both online and offline. As the days passed, the cultural impact became clear. Keanu Reeves didn't just win a moment, he sparked a movement. His response reminded millions that true power lies not in shouting or aggression, but in calm dignity and kindness. Meanwhile, Melissa Carter and her team faced mounting criticism for their approach. Viewers and commentators called out the attempt to trap Keanu as manipulative and outdated. The public largely sided with Keanu, applauding his refusal to engage in negativity. The viral explosion had consequences beyond social media. Sponsors reconsidered their support for the show, networks debated its future, and Melissa herself faced a reckoning. Yet through it all, Keanu stayed true to his character, quiet, humble, and focused on the bigger picture. His victory was not about winning an argument, but about elevating a conversation. The interview became a landmark moment, remembered as an example of grace under pressure and the enduring power of respect. After the interview's explosive viral success, Melissa Carter found herself in a precarious position. The interview had not gone as she had planned. Rather than cornering Keanu Reeves and producing a sensational viral moment at his expense, she had been outmaneuvered by his calm and thoughtful responses. The public overwhelmingly praised Keanu's grace, while Melissa faced growing criticism online and in the media. Determined to regain control of the narrative, Melissa recorded a response video. In it, she expressed respect for Keanu Reeves, emphasizing that she had only been doing her job by asking tough questions. Her tone was measured, attempting to soften the backlash. She added that the intention was to spark debate on evolving Hollywood narratives and masculinity. However, the video did little to quell the public's reaction. Instead, many viewers perceived Melissa's response as defensive and dismissive. Critics argued that she was refusing to take accountability for the ambush-style interview. Social media comments poured in, pointing out that Keanu had handled the situation with far more dignity and composure than she had. Some commenters also accused Melissa of deflecting blame onto Keanu and his fans for taking things out of context, which only further fueled the backlash. Memes mocking Melissa's attempts to save face began circulating widely, many using clips of Keanu's poised interview juxtaposed with her strained apology. Meanwhile, major sponsors started reconsidering their association with the Melissa Carter show. Several companies quietly pulled their advertisements, not wanting to be linked to the growing controversy. The show's ratings began to decline noticeably as viewers tuned out, favoring more positive and authentic content. Behind the scenes, network executives grew increasingly concerned. Internal meetings were convened to discuss the show's future. The momentum had shifted dramatically. What was once a top-rated talk show now faced serious questions about its viability. Melissa's team scrambled to craft damage control strategies. They debated whether to double down on the confrontational style or pivot to a more conciliatory approach. But with public sentiment overwhelmingly against them, the options felt limited. The atmosphere around the show was tense and uncertain. Melissa, once a confident and commanding presence, now felt the weight of the backlash. Her carefully cultivated image was tarnished, and her grip on the show's control was slipping fast. The backlash against Melissa Carter intensified in the days following her response video. Social media remained aflame with criticism, and her attempts to justify the ambush interview were met with little sympathy. Fans of Keanu Reeves and neutral viewers alike expressed disappointment in Melissa's unwillingness to acknowledge the impact of her tactics. Comment sections on various platforms were filled with calls to boycott the show. Many viewers argued that the style of aggressive, trap-laden interviews no longer resonated with audiences hungry for authentic and respectful conversations. They praised Keanu's example as a sign of what media should aspire to. Advertisers, watching the public mood closely, began to pull their support more openly. Several key sponsors released statements, distancing themselves from the controversy, citing a desire to align with values of respect and positive discourse. The financial implications for the show were immediate and severe. Ratings began to slide noticeably. The show's usual primetime slot saw lower viewership numbers, and competing programs gained ground. Network executives became increasingly alarmed. The talk show landscape was changing rapidly, and Melissa's brand of confrontational journalism was losing relevance. Behind closed doors, Melissa met with her producers and advisors. The discussions were tense. Some urged her to publicly apologize and pivot the show's tone, while others argued she should stand firm and double down on the confrontational style that had brought her initial success. Melissa herself was conflicted. She was proud of her tough interviewing style, which had earned her respect and notoriety over the years, but the damage to her reputation was undeniable. The viral moment with Keanu had exposed the risks of that approach in a new cultural climate. At times, Melissa found herself isolated, the pressure mounting. Her social media accounts were flooded with negative messages, some harsh and personal. The once steady support from her fan base had fractured. The network called for an emergency meeting to discuss the future of the Melissa Carter Show. The options were stark: significant rebranding, a change in hosting, or potentially canceling the program altogether. The uncertainty weighed heavily on Melissa. For the first time in her career, she faced the real possibility of losing the platform she had built over years. The interview with Keanu Reeves was not just a viral sensation, it had become a turning point, a moment that would define her career's trajectory. As the days passed, the situation for Melissa Carter grew increasingly dire. The network's emergency meeting culminated in a decision that sent shockwaves through the industry. The Melissa Carter Show would be quietly phased out. Plans were made to gradually reduce its airtime, with no clear successor lined up, signaling the effective end of her television reign. Melissa was informed of the decision in a private meeting. The news was a heavy blow, confirming the severity of the backlash and the irreversible damage to the show's reputation. She sat quietly, grappling with the reality that a single interview, an attempt to create viral content, had cost her everything. Despite the professional setback, Melissa remained defiant publicly. She released a statement acknowledging the passionate responses to the interview and expressing hope for more open conversations in the future. However, her words rang hollow to many, perceived as a thinly veiled attempt to salvage her fading career. Sponsors who had pulled out earlier remained firm in their stance, unwilling to return as long as the controversy lingered. Advertisers shifted their budgets toward programming perceived as more positive and audience-friendly. Melissa's social media presence dwindled. The online communities that once celebrated her sharp wit now viewed her as a cautionary tale, someone who underestimated the power of humility and kindness in the modern media landscape. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves continued quietly with his life and career. He chose not to engage in the ongoing media drama, letting his calm demeanor and the viral interview speak for itself. His simple phrase, "Respect seems optional these days," had become a cultural touchstone, repeated across platforms and embraced by millions. Melissa's downfall became a case study in how public opinion, amplified by social media, could reshape careers overnight. It was a reminder that in an era of instant viral moments, authenticity and grace often triumph over aggression and spectacle. The Melissa Carter Show's decline was swift and decisive, a stark contrast to the enduring respect and admiration Keanu Reeves earned from his poised response. The story of their interview became more than just television drama. It became a lesson in the power of kindness, dignity, and the changing tides of media culture. After the storm of the interview and the ensuing viral explosion, Keanu Reeves chose a path many admired: silence. Instead of engaging in the swirling media frenzy, he retreated from the spotlight, letting his calm demeanor and thoughtful words continue to resonate without further amplification. Keanu knew that sometimes the most powerful response isn't to shout louder, but to hold steady. His quiet confidence spoke volumes, contrasting sharply with the chaotic noise of social media debates and media spin. Days after the interview aired, as the public discourse continued to swirl, Keanu was approached outside a studio by a reporter seeking his final thoughts. The camera was rolling, lights flashing, and the crowd buzzing with anticipation. With a gentle smile and his usual grace, Keanu replied simply, "Gentleness never goes out of style." The phrase, succinct yet profound, instantly captured the essence of his message and his approach to the entire situation. That brief statement spread like wildfire across social media, quickly becoming another viral moment. Fans and admirers praised the elegance and wisdom packed into those 6 words. Memes, GIFs, and videos featuring Keanu's smile and his iconic phrase flooded platforms worldwide. The message of gentleness and kindness struck a chord, inspiring many to rethink how they respond to conflict and criticism. By choosing to remain silent in the face of controversy, Keanu demonstrated a remarkable strength. He showed that grace and patience can be more impactful than heated rebuttals or public spats. This moment of quiet dignity became symbolic, a reminder that true power often lies in restraint, compassion, and the ability to rise above negativity. Keanu's choice to speak sparingly only amplified the impact of his words. The phrase, "gentleness never goes out of style," became a rallying cry, repeated by millions across social media and beyond. It resonated not just because of its simplicity, but because it embodied everything Keanu represented: humility, kindness, and quiet strength. The Mulholland Street supporters shared stories of personal struggles, explaining how Keanu's response inspired them to approach challenges with patience and empathy. It was as if those 6 words had given people permission to choose gentleness in their own lives. Parents recounted teaching their children to respond with kindness in difficult situations. Teachers shared how they used the phrase to encourage understanding in classrooms. The ripple effect was profound and widespread. Media outlets that had initially fixated on the controversy gradually shifted focus. Articles began praising Keanu's composed and graceful handling of the situation, contrasting it with the combative tone of the interviewer. Critics and commentators alike remarked on how Keanu's calmness under pressure was a lesson in dignity, one that resonated far beyond Hollywood. Celebrities and public figures joined the conversation, sharing the phrase widely. Many spoke about how rare it was to see authenticity and humility in the public eye today, and they applauded Keanu for reminding the world of the power of kindness. His response was seen as a beacon of hope in an era often characterized by conflict and division. Meanwhile, Keanu continued with his work quietly and deliberately. He attended film sets and charity events and spent time with family and close friends, deliberately avoiding the media spotlight. This restraint added weight to his message, as the world observed his calm demeanor in stark contrast to the frenzy surrounding the interview. His silence became a powerful statement in itself. By refusing to engage in prolonged public disputes, Keanu allowed the culture to reflect on the importance of gentleness and respect. His quiet strength encouraged many to reconsider how they approached conflict, both online and in real life. The phrase, "gentleness never goes out of style," sparked a social media trend, with people sharing personal moments when they chose patience and compassion over anger or frustration. Hashtags related to gentleness trended for weeks, with users posting stories of forgiveness, kindness, and emotional resilience inspired by Keanu's example. Keanu's silent victory was a profound reminder that true influence does not require loudness or aggression. It's a testament to the power of calm dignity and the enduring strength found in kindness. As the viral phrase, "gentleness never goes out of style," continued to spread, its influence reached beyond social media and news outlets. Educational programs, community organizations, and even corporate workshops began incorporating the message into discussions about leadership, communication, and emotional intelligence. Teachers used it to encourage students to handle bullying and conflict with empathy rather than retaliation. Leaders cited it as a reminder that strength and kindness are not mutually exclusive, but essential partners in effective leadership. Keanu's example sparked a broader cultural reflection. People from all walks of life began sharing how a gentle approach to conflict had transformed their relationships and communities. Stories emerged of neighbors resolving disputes peacefully, workplaces improving their culture through respect, and families embracing forgiveness over grudges. Despite the worldwide attention, Keanu remained remarkably grounded. He rarely addressed the media after the initial viral moments, choosing instead to focus on his projects and personal life. His humility and discretion only deepened public respect. Meanwhile, Melissa Carter's situation continued to deteriorate. Her show was quietly phased out amid declining ratings and lost sponsorships, a stark contrast to Keanu's growing admiration. The public narrative framed the interview as a turning point, where grace and gentleness had defeated aggression and manipulation. The interview and its aftermath became a defining moment in Keanu's career and public image. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from confrontation but from quiet strength and integrity. In the end, Keanu's silent victory left an enduring legacy. He showed the world that gentleness is timeless and that true power is found not in force but in compassion. Keanu Reeves' encounter on The Melissa Carter Show became more than just a televised interview. It became a defining cultural moment. The way he handled the ambush-style questioning, maintaining calm, dignity, and grace, resonated deeply with millions around the world. His measured words and quiet strength struck a powerful chord in a time when public discourse often feels hostile and divisive. The phrase, "gentleness never goes out of style," became a mantra, not just for fans of Keanu, but for anyone seeking a way to navigate conflict with empathy and respect. His example reminded viewers that true power lies not in shouting louder or winning arguments through aggression, but in responding with patience and kindness. Reflecting on the interview, it is clear that Keanu did more than just defend himself. He elevated the conversation. He challenged viewers to think critically about masculinity, strength, and the stories we tell. His responses went beyond surface-level debate, touching on themes of courage, loyalty, and the human need to protect and care for others. This moment marked a shift in how public figures can influence culture. Keanu's approach demonstrated that vulnerability and compassion are strengths, not weaknesses. He modeled a way to engage thoughtfully without escalating tension, showing that listening and responding calmly can disarm hostility. For many, Keanu's grace became a beacon of hope, a reminder that in a world full of noise and conflict, gentleness and respect still hold immense value. His conduct on the show challenged the prevailing notion that confrontation and sensationalism are necessary for attention. As viewers, we are invited to reflect on the lessons embedded in this story. How often do we respond to adversity with anger or defensiveness? What would happen if, like Keanu, we chose gentleness and understanding instead? The interview's legacy extends beyond Hollywood or celebrity culture. It touches on universal human values. It calls us to reconsider how we treat one another in public debates, personal conflicts, and everyday interactions. Keanu Reeves' silent victory is a testament to the enduring power of kindness and integrity. It encourages us to think about what kind of influence we want to have in the world and how we can embody strength through empathy. As the impact of Keanu Reeves' interview continues to ripple through culture, it reveals deeper questions about society's values today. His calm and dignified responses challenge the aggressive, often divisive tone that dominates media and public discourse. This moment invites us to reconsider what true strength means, not dominance or loudness, but quiet confidence rooted in respect. Keanu's refusal to be baited by provocative questions exemplifies emotional intelligence and self-control. He turns the trap into an opportunity for teaching rather than confrontation. By doing so, he elevates the dialogue and sets an example for how we might approach difficult conversations ourselves. This story compels us to think about how we treat others, especially when we disagree. It challenges the culture of quick judgment and encourages us to pause, listen, and respond with kindness. Keanu's words highlight that respect should never be optional, regardless of one's status or beliefs. The interview's viral success also reflects a collective hunger for authenticity and compassion. Audiences are craving moments that remind them of shared humanity, not division. Keanu's example taps into this desire, showing that grace under pressure can be more powerful than aggression. For those watching, it's a call to action, to practice gentleness in their own lives, to seek understanding instead of conflict, and to remember that kindness often requires strength. This lesson transcends the entertainment industry and touches every aspect of society. Keanu Reeves' handling of this ambush interview leaves a legacy that goes beyond a viral clip. It becomes a symbol of how integrity and empathy can shift conversations and influence culture. His quiet strength offers hope in a time when public discourse can seem fractured and contentious. This is not just a story about one man or one interview. It is an invitation to reflect on how we choose to engage with the world. It asks us to consider whether we can embody the values Keanu demonstrated and foster a culture of respect and compassion. The scene ends with Eddie and Priscilla. As we come to the close of this story, the profound legacy of Keanu Reeves' poised and masterful handling of the ambush interview stands clear. His calmness and unwavering dignity did far more than secure a moment of victory on television. They sparked a significant cultural conversation. In an era rife with division, hostility, and rapid-fire judgments, Keanu reminded us all of the enduring power of kindness, respect, and humility. This story invites every viewer to reflect deeply. When confronted with hostility or provocation, how do you respond? Is your first impulse anger, defensiveness, or gentleness? Can strength truly coexist with compassion? Keanu's example illuminates that it is not only possible, but profoundly impactful to be firm and courageous while maintaining grace and kindness. What makes his words and actions so powerful is their genuine simplicity. Keanu did not rely on grandstanding or aggression. Instead, his authenticity cut through the noise and opened a space for thoughtful reflection. This lesson transcends celebrity culture. It applies to our everyday lives and interactions, reminding us all of the value of patience, empathy, and thoughtful dialogue. We hope this story sparks within you an awareness of how you approach conflict, disagreement, and moments of tension. Imagine if we all embraced gentleness as a strength, choosing understanding over escalation and respect over judgment. Such a shift could transform relationships, communities, and even the broader cultural landscape. Keanu Reeves' silent victory is not merely a personal triumph. It is a beacon of hope and a guidepost for living with dignity and grace. In a world too often overshadowed by noise and confrontation, he showed us that calm, measured responses rooted in kindness hold immense power. This story also reminds us all of the responsibility we carry to foster understanding in our communities. It challenges us to think critically about how our words and actions either fuel discord or build bridges. The choice to embody empathy and respect lies with each individual. As you carry forward Keanu's message, remember that respect is never optional and gentleness is a profound strength. When faced with conflict, You have the power to respond with grace, to diffuse tension, and to inspire others through your conduct. Thank you for watching this story unfold. What lessons did you draw from Keanu's approach? How will you choose to respond the next time you face hostility or challenge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let this story ignite a movement toward compassion, understanding, and a gentler world for us all.